Lesson 7 is about level of content, tone, style, and format, which are necessary for you to effectively write your academic essay. Okay, so at some point in your academic life, your instructors would provide you or give you an assignment that would require you to write a persuasive essay to argue about a certain topic. To be convincing on your stand, your persuasive essay must be based on sound logic and factual evidence that support your overall argument. As you begin to think about writing your essay, here are some of the generic tips that will help you argue your topic. The first tip is to choose a position that you are very passionate about. The first step in writing a persuasive essay is to choose a topic and to pick a side. However, if the topic is provided by your instructor, then you will have no choice but to number 2. Thoroughly research about that given topic. Now, you are not just going to read about one side of the topic. You have to thoroughly research both sides. Okay, that's for tip number 2. Every argument has a counter-argument. This is one of the staples of rhetoric. To convince your reader to agree with you, you must be knowledgeable as well of the opposing side. As important as it is to thoroughly research your topic, identifying and studying both sides of the argument will also help you to develop the strongest supporting evidence possible. It will also help you to construct the strongest claim possible. Tip number 3. Draft an effective thesis statement. One of the most important elements of a persuasive essay is the thesis statement. In some references, it's actually considered the most important of the parts in a persuasive essay. It encompasses exactly what your stance is about. Without a forceful thesis, you will not be able to deliver an effective argument. The construction of your thesis should include the what and the how of your argument. For the what is the argument you are trying to convince your readers to accept? And for the how, you have to also present in your thesis the supporting evidence. Okay, how will I convince my readers that the argument is sound? Okay, for tip number 4, outline your ideas. Create a working structure or outline. Outlining your paper will give you a clear view of your argument and the way it develops. It will also help you remove the unnecessary parts and add what's missing. It can also help you save some time for the revision. Number 5, write with integrity and empathy. Be ethical, logical, and passionate in your reasoning. The most successful arguments draw on these 3 main elements. Okay, ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethical, logical, and passionate reasoning. If you reason out through these ways perfectly, then it will make your argument powerful that nobody could disagree. Okay? However, this is easier said than done. You need ethically, you will have to make sure that you are not misleading nor manipulating your argument. That's what we mean by ethical reasoning. You are not misleading or manipulating your argument. Logically, your points must be based on facts, and they should progress in a way that makes sense. Passionate reasoning means that you should emphasize your evidence and use strategic repetition. Okay, you use strategic repetition to compel your audience. The key is to find a harmony or balance among these three elements: writing with integrity and empathy. Next, we move on to content writing and level of content. First off, what is content writing? Simply put, content writing is the kind of writing for internet audience, and it is based on a particular keyword. So examples of content writers are ghost writers, copywriters, technical writers. Okay, so these are people working on articles which are expected to be published on the internet for a particular target audience. Now, content writing is actually less about writing than people. It's because content writing is more on connecting with the target audience than the actual act of writing itself. Your writing, your level of writing, should match your audience's level. So for example, you are targeting a group of people who are into cosmetics, then the contents of your written materials or write-ups should be based on the level of perception, the level of awareness of these target readers. The jargons or the terms that you use, the structure of sentences should not be complex, and so on and so forth. Now, how to check your level of content? These are two best ways of checking the level of your content. First off is by asking someone, preferably from the same target group, to read your work. If that particular reader would be able to understand the content of your write-up and there will be no confusion at all, and that there is interaction between your chosen reader from the target group and your material, then the level of your content matches his or her level of understanding based on the target content. Another tip is to study well-known content examples and compare your work. So if you are expected to write a blog about a certain location, before you write, you may check out examples of the same blogs and compare your output to theirs. Before you actually write your essay, it is important to review the principles of composition in order for you to eventually find your unique style in writing. Professor White, in his book, The Elements of Style, by the way, I will be providing you a soft copy of that book. I hope that you will render some time review its contents. Okay, in that book, he said, a careful and honest writer does not need to worry about style. So he said in the book that it should be the last thing in your mind, especially when you are a beginner writer. Do not worry about style, because as you become proficient in the use of language, I repeat, as you become proficient in the use of language, your style will emerge, because you yourself will emerge. And when this happens, you will be separated from other minds, from other hearts. So it means to say, you will be revealing, you will be allowing your unique way, your unique style of writing as you go along the process of developing your writing skills. So what he is trying to say here is, practically speaking, you should begin by first mastering grammar, mastering the rules of a language, keeping in mind the principles of composition, because as you become proficient in the use of English, your style will naturally come out. Aside from grammar or the rules of a language, which should always be kept in mind whenever you write, you also need to be aware of the tone in your material or your tone in writing. What is tone in writing? Simply put, it is the mood that your material provides or elicits every time somebody reads it. The tone of your sentences, paragraphs, and even your entire essay is determined by your choice of words or your word choices. Your chosen words or the words that you use in a written material will indicate definitely your feelings about a particular subject. Your words will also signal your intention, whether to explain, instruct, entertain, or persuade. And since it will determine your intention, you need to be consistent. So, for example, in the introduction, you would use strong words to compel your readers of a particular stance. Then the rest of the essay should also contain words which are compelling, argumentative, or persuasive, but not in an aggressive way. You should choose words which would sound certain and with conviction in order for your audience to be compelled or to be swayed into taking your side. Okay, so how to maintain an appropriate tone? First rule is that you should avoid words that may not be understood, such as slang, jargon, and foreign terms. Slang is the informal language of a particular social group, while jargon is the specialized vocabulary of a profession or occupation. Both are forms of language with special meanings that may not be generally understood, and both can distort the tone of a passage. Similarly, unnecessary foreign terms can mystify readers who do not understand them. You should replace such language with expressions and explanations that are more widely understood. For example, beg off. Instead of using beg off, we may use decline. Okay, so beg off is a slang expression which may be replaced with a more effective or acceptable word, decline. Example sentence, using the slang expression beg off, we decided to beg off from Miss Malion's invitation. So let us revise that sentence and let us use instead the more acceptable or more precise word, which is decline. We decided to decline Miss Malion's invitation. Next, rule number 2. Avoid self-important language and replace them with simpler, more direct words. Expressions that sound highfalutin or pompous, boastful, cocky, and self-important words distort the tone of your writing and may even mislead the reader. Self-important language tries to impress the reader with flowery expressions, unnecessarily lengthy sentences or words, complicated structures that sound pretentious. It introduces a falseness and emptiness into your writing. Therefore, you should avoid it. For example, we have this phrase, garrulous waiters So it's the word garrulous is a flowery expression or a highfalutin term, which actually sounds pretentious or self-important. It's a boastful way, or it's a it's a way of showing or implying to your reader that you know a lot of vocabulary and vocabulary words which are advanced and highfalutin. So some readers might be turned off by your use of such terms. So instead of using them, you may, instead of using garrulous, use the adjective talkative. So example sentence, garrulous waiters attempted to obtain large tips by acting uh, friendly. So instead of using garrulous to make it an even simpler sentence, we can convert that sentence into something like this. Talkative waiters tried to get very large tips by acting friendly. Okay, next, tip number 3, to maintain an appropriate tone. Replace euphemisms that make your writing insincere. Use direct language. Euphemisms, euphemisms are expressions that attempt to cushion the truth. For example, instead of saying die, you would use the expression pass away. The expression pass away softens the impact of the idea of death. The word detained is sometimes used as a euphemism for arrested. So, which of the two is better based on this tip to maintain an appropriate tone? So, instead of using detained, which is a euphemism, it would be better to use the more direct word arrested. Instead of using the expression pass away, which is a euphemism, be direct. Okay, be direct. Use the word die instead. The terms are generally used by people who want to sound nice. Unfortunately, they frequently distort what is being said, and it can mislead the reader. Okay, so example, instead of saying that a certain group of people had a disagreement, the writer would opt to use the expression a frank exchange of views, which is not a direct way of saying that two parties had a disagreement. Okay, so again, replace euphemisms with direct language so you wouldn't sound insincere or falsely nice. Okay, next tip in maintaining an appropriate tone is to replace overly emotional language with reasonable language. Emotional language consists of name-calling, extreme modifiers or extreme adjectives, and other similar expressions. Overly emotional language disrupts the rational tone you should be aiming for in your writing. In addition, it makes you seem insincere and it can evoke hostility, anger in readers who disagree with you. Listen to this example. Okay, in this example sentence, okay, which is an overly emotional uh, description, this particular clause is used: foolishness and insensitivity of the manipulators who run the government. And this one is replaced with a more reasonable phrase. Okay, listen to the example. The city's most recent cutbacks in garbage removal are just another indication of the foolishness and insensitivity of the manipulators who run the government. Okay, so that really sounds overly emotional. Now, if we would replace these extreme modifiers with a more objective or rational words, it will sound something like this. The city's most recent cutbacks in garbage removal are evidence, okay, are evidence of what could be considered as a disturbing new policy in this administration. Okay. The words foolish and insensitive were replaced with the more rational word disturbing, while the word manipulators who run the government, a phrase which is overly emotional, overly um, expressive, okay, is replaced with a more reasonable and logical word, administration. Okay, so remember that to avoid emotional language and replace them with reasonable, logical, rational language. Next tip. Avoid or eliminate non-essential words. Okay, avoid non-essential words. Non-essential words are also called dead wood. They are also called dead wood. These words and phrases fill out sentences without adding meaning. Okay, they are acting like paddings, okay, fillers to confuse and distract a reader. To make your writing concise, eliminate these dead words or unnecessary or non-essential words. On the next slide, you will see a chart that contains words and phrases that are usually dead word, and there are examples below. Next tip. Tip number 6. Avoid redundancy and wordiness. Words that repeat ideas in a sentence are redundant. You can easily identify redundancy by looking for words or phrases that repeat the meaning of other words that are already placed in the sentence. For example, okay, whispered quietly. When you whisper, well, it's done quietly. So instead of adding the adverb quietly, remove quietly because it's making the phrase redundant already. So simply write whispered. Another usual example that I often see in college essays is this particular phrase, repeat again. When you repeat, it's being redone, okay? So remove again and simply say repeat. Okay, another one. Okay, look at this sentence. He used a baseball slightly deformed in shape to create a curve in the pitch. So we're talking about baseball here. The word deformed is already referring to shape. So the phrase in shape is making this word redundant. So we better remove this one. Okay, it will be better to remove this to avoid redundancy and wordiness. Okay, next we have the last example. My friend who loves to play musical instruments enjoys playing the guitar, the piano, and the trumpet. This phrase, enjoys playing, okay, and the rest of the sentence already convey a love, okay, they already convey a love of playing musical instruments. So therefore, this particular clause here is already unnecessary. It's just repeating what this part of the sentence is already trying to say. And it's just making the sentence wordy. So remove this part to make it an effective sentence. Okay? So there you go. Avoid redundancy and wordiness. Okay, to explain further what dead wood or empty words are. We have here example sentences. Okay, I will be only explaining the first example. So look at this example sentence. Rains continued for 2 more days to the extent that they caused major highways to be closed. So what here, or which words here are considered empty, unnecessary, which should be deleted? So this is the revised and a more concise version of this sentence. Rains continued for 2 more days, causing major highways to be closed. So which words were removed? So we have here to the extent, okay, to the extent that they, okay, and the removal of these words did not affect at all the meaning of the sentence. So these words here are examples of empty words, are examples of unnecessary or non-essential words. Okay, next, seventh tip, use orthodox spelling. In ordinary composition, use orthodox spelling. Do not write through for through, cause for because, gonna for going to, or please you, P-L-E-E-Z for please, unless you plan to introduce a complete system of simplified spelling and you are prepared to take the consequences of your work. Okay, and also unless it is required in the written assignment. Okay, but for ordinary composition, for academic composition, use orthodox spelling. Tip number 8. Do not construct awkward adverbs just for the purpose of describing verbs. Examples, we have tangibly, squishily. To make squishy an adverb, or to make blue an adverb, you add ly and we say bluishly. Okay, adverbs are very easy to build. Take an adjective or a participle and simply add ly. But do not construct awkward adverbs. Last tip is to use figures of speech sparingly. Simile is a common device and a useful one, but simile that bombards an essay or a write-up would definitely distract the readers. Readers would need the time to figure out what you're trying to say, because figures of speech do not possess a literal message. Kaya sila tinawag na figures of speech is because whoever would read that or encounter that particular line will have to figure out its literal meaning. And if you would use a lot of figures of speech in your work, then your reader would have to take a lot of time figuring out what you're trying to say. If you are observant enough, during the preliminary period, our focus was on grammar. Okay, we reviewed grammar or the rules of the English language so that you will be reminded about subject-verb correspondence or subject-verb agreement. We also reviewed rules of punctuating sentences in order to avoid comma splices, run-ons, and so on and so forth. Even prepositions were reviewed. Okay, after the preliminary period, we now move on to your choice of words. Okay, word choices in order to attain and to maintain an appropriate tone. These two important elements of composition, grammar and word choices, can definitely help you figure out or determine your style. Okay, so we now move on to your style in writing. And to reiterate the advice on style by William Strunk and White, mentioned in their book, The Elements of Style, allow me to read the following bullets, which are excerpts from the book. Remember that a careful and honest writer does not need to worry about style. You must begin by writing in a way that comes easily and naturally to you. Use words and phrases that come readily to hand. Do not assume, however, that your product is without error, so you should still proofread. As you become proficient in your use of language, the grammar, vocabulary, your style will naturally emerge. The use of language begins with imitation. You can also start, or you can also improve your style by looking for and observing the works of your, say for example, your favorite authors. Okay, the infant imitates the sounds made by its parents. The child imitates the first spoken language, then the stuff of books. The imitation or the imitative life continues long after the writer is secure in the language. It is almost impossible to avoid imitating what one person admires. So it can be helpful to regularly read. It can really be helpful to regularly read. And once you stumble upon an author who's got a unique writing style which you admire, you may try to imitate that style of writing. However, never imitate never imitate consciously. Okay, but do not worry about being an imitator. Okay, so admire what is good. Continue admiring what is good. Okay, then when you write in a way that comes naturally, you will echo what you have decided to imitate. Okay, and it's going to be repetitive. Your style takes its final form from attitudes of your mind, then from the principles of composition. Okay, so writing is an act of faith, not a trick of grammar. So if you write, you must believe in the truth and the worth of your ability, okay, in order for you to write a message. So you have to really discipline your mind, okay, in order for you to in order to allow your style to naturally emerge by itself. Another way of achieving style is by means of using different sentence structures. Okay, there are many ways to begin sentences to help you achieve a lively sentence style. To achieve sentence variety, you should also think about varying structures, okay, or using varied structures. Be careful, however, not to let too many words come between the subject and verb of your sentence. So avoid wordiness, avoid unnecessary or non-essential words. Do you still remember the dead wood? Okay, so avoid them. So you may try writing sentences through these different structures. You may begin using this pattern or structure, subject, verb, and then with adjectives. This is an example. Okay, you may review these examples, and if you wish, you may apply them when you write your original essay. Although you are advised to write in a natural way or in a way that comes easily and naturally to you using words and phrases that are already available, okay, remember that you should not assume that your product is already flawless or without error. Here is a practical tip, okay, to ensure that your work has zero or has less flaws or errors, you may use an online readability checking software for preliminary proofreading and editing. So here are examples of free online readability softwares or websites. We have Grammarly, Hemingway, and Readable. They are all still available online, and you may use them for the preliminary proofreading and editing of your written work. This is the last part of the lecture, so we will be talking about the format of your essay. Now, of course, you have to anticipate what you are getting into, so you really need to understand the requirement. Your midterm requirement or your midterm essay is going to be an academic / persuasive essay. So you really have to understand what a persuasive essay is and how it should be structured so that you would know how to create an outline or plan for it. Other than that, okay, your midterm essay will also be required to have citations, and for the citations we will be reviewing next, or our next lesson will be about the APA 7th edition. Moreover, a template will be provided for your midterm essay, so you have to wait for the posting of the template which you are expected to use. This is the end of the presentation. If you want to read more about the points mentioned here, you may visit this website, and you may also render some time checking out or reading the contents of the provided soft copy of the Elements of Style by Strunk and White.